We now, ladies and gentlemen, widen the lens to look at what truly powers a global quantum ecosystem. The collaboration between government, academia, and industry that turns shared vision into collective progress. And for this panel discussion, I'd like to invite Madhavi Mantha, Head Strategy and Partnerships from Pinq2. Let's also welcome Stefanos Kourtis, Associate Professor at Université de Sherbrooke. And finally, let's welcome Meera Raja, SVP of Deep Tech from P33 Chicago. Thank you to the three of you for being here with us today. And I have some questions. I have three questions for you, and all my questions are for all of you, so you feel free to add on what the other people just said. And my first question is the following. What are the essential ingredients of a thriving quantum ecosystem? And how do talent, funding, regulation, and culture interact?
Thank you. Great question. Many ingredients in a thriving quantum ecosystem. And just to provide a bit of context, we have two Canadians represented on this panel, and we are both sort of directly or indirectly part of the District Quantum Innovation Zone. PINQ, where I work, provides one key element of that ecosystem, and that is access to infrastructure. We provide a hybrid quantum and classical environment that hosts, we're quite unique in this, the IBM Quantum System 1. We will also be making the Pasqal computer available through our platform, which comes from District. And we also have classical CPUs and GPUs. So providing an infrastructure that actually allows both universities and industry to experiment on real-world hybrid quantum classical algorithms is a big part of our mission. But what I would say is infrastructure is necessary but insufficient. And it takes more than that. And helping industry understand how should they start? What should they focus on? What problems are relevant? How do you make quantum real? In accompanying them in that journey is a very big part of our focus as an organization and where we complement what others in the ecosystem are doing.
Thank you very much. Stefanos?
Yeah, maybe for me, at least the most important aspect is talent and developing the talent. In Sherbrooke, we recognized that very early on, and now we have an undergrad program in quantum information science, a bachelor's specifically for quantum information. And within a few years, I think we had the first graduates of the program this year. These people are built to be tinkerers with technology. Last week, some of the students from this program went to Yale for a hackathon, and they secured 2 positions on the podium, including the first one. So within a very little time of 2-3 years, you can have people who are bred to be tinkerers with this technology. And the important thing there is also to encourage them to tinker. So why do we remember Feynman? Because Feynman was cheeky, right? He made all these jokes and all these analogies, it's the spirit of irreverence, right? So somebody said, physicists are kind of arrogant and they think that they can solve everything. Well, okay, maybe that's good, right? Overall, right? Somebody who thinks they can solve problems, because then actually they might.
I think this is great. I'm the non-Canadian on the stage. I agree with everything they both said. So for some context, I work with an organization called P33. We're an inclusive economic development nonprofit in Chicago. I'm our SVP of Deep Tech, so I lead our sort of deep tech portfolio, of which quantum is a huge part. Quantum is a big thing in Chicago, and we're building this very large quantum campus for scale up right now. We're very involved in a project on that, and Illinois is doing a large part of that work. I agree with both of what they said, and so to add on top of that, I think, and sort of piggyback on the last thing that you said, I think thinking about sort of the broader impacts of what you can do with that ecosystem, right? You're building this large ecosystem in this region. How do you make sure that everyone benefits from it? How do you make sure that it's not just the quantum and the technology that's moving forward, but how do you use that platform to be able to then think of what the community around you looks like, making sure that you have representation, making sure that you're able to get everyone to see themselves as part of that quantum ecosystem is going to be really beneficial moving forward.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about international collaboration. I think here we have a good example here in the room with all of you from 15 different countries. Where has this international collaboration genuinely accelerated quantum development?
Yeah, maybe one thing I can say is that I wear two hats. One is as a professor at Université de Sherbrooke, and there when we do this bleeding edge research, it is always the people you talk with and the people who are with you in this journey are always halfway across the planet by default. So it is very important. One thing that has really impressed me in recent years is that to which extent I'm by training a quantum person, quantum physicist. I grew up in hard condensed matter, and back in the day we used to do make theories of how matter behaves. And you know, the question is, so what? Nowadays, we study we use the same principles to study quantum systems, and now people care a lot. So what was fundamental, the divide between fundamental and applied has really changed. And so in my group now we have collaborations with Pasqal, with NVIDIA, with Ericsson, with all these big players who are interested in their research. So quantum has really opened up these opportunities for us.
I'll add to that from two different perspectives. So first, I think a lot of countries, Canada as an example, the US, obviously France, Spain, have started to create their own national ecosystems, and in some cases national ecosystems with multiple hubs. In Canada, we've got one, I would say, the original strong hub in Sherbrooke. We've got a hub in Toronto. We've got a hub in BC, in Alberta. So very strong critical mass. But we also are, I think, increasingly relying on exchanging with our peers in other countries. What's working? What's not working? How is that transition between industry to academia? We don't speak the same language. And this is between theoretical and experimental scientists. Now we're starting to bring a diverse set of voices to the table, which I would say are critical to support commercialization. You're talking computer scientists, people with an architecture background, in my case, systems thinking, business people, researchers. So you're bringing much broader range of voices to the table. And one thing I look forward to learning from peers at Genci, from peers in Basque, are what's working? How are you managing to bridge that divide that exists inherently between these different diverse types of stakeholders so you can actually do useful things with this incredibly promising technology? And that is, I think, a conversation we're just starting to have. And I think having that conversation at an international scale is important because we're just going to get better faster by not staying within our own little silos. So that's one perspective. I think the other aspect is something that was mentioned, and that is talent. Talent remains mobile, and that's a good thing. And I think being able to take advantage of some of the resources that we have around the world in order to both share and project new learnings is I think a second aspect that's really important.
Thank you very much.
I think I'll also take sort of two takes on this. One, going off of what Madhavi just said, I think quantum is a nascent field, right? We are all sort of moving. It was very scientific. Now we're moving towards industry. We're thinking about what scale up for it looks like. And I feel like every one of these ecosystems that's coming together, every one of these nations is sort of riding on the backs of the latest discovery and then moving it one step forward. And so if we can all talk to each other, we can really start to learn from that. We can think about as we're moving in these steps, is that the right direction to go? What, do you start with the problem? Do you start with the technology? Which of these makes sense? And it's so helpful to have that group to think about and that diverse set of perspectives. So fully agree with that, and think we need to figure out how to continue those conversations. I think the other part of it, just sort of from a practical perspective, is the supply chain piece of it, right? Quantum is truly a global supply chain at this point, and being able to make sure we know how to all work together to make that happen, I think is really useful.
Thank you very much. And the last question for all of you is what is the appropriate role for governments as funders, regulators, customers, or conveners in shaping the next generation of quantum infrastructure?
PINQ is a not-profit. We are funded by the government, but we have a unique sort of very mission-driven mandate to how do we make advanced computing potential actually used and adopted by industry. And so we are fully funded by the government, but we have a very commercial mindset. How do we support industry through that entire journey? So I think the government will have to continue to play an important funding role. Why? Because this is still a nascent technology, inherently risky from the perspective of those that are adopting. And so how do you reduce the cost and risk of adoption in order to encourage early innovation on real-world problems? It's by making it more accessible, and part of making it more accessible is making it affordable. That requires money from the government. However, I think there's also, as a customer you mentioned, and I think that's increasingly important, countries need to buy their technology. And they need to buy the technology of those from other countries as well. Why? So that they can be in a position to really support their homegrown innovation. And not just at the research level, at a personal level, we've seen, I think, too many times in my career where we've done an amazing job at developing cutting-edge research and have not necessarily succeeded in commercializing it in Canada to the degree we absolutely should. And I think we simply cannot allow that to happen in the future. And I think everybody in different countries feels that way. So very, very important government role to act as the customer. And the convener, well, we're an illustration of that around this table. We're part of an ecosystem, convening that ecosystem. I would say it isn't so much the government role. They need to enable it through the other things I mentioned, and our role around this table is to really act as those conveners and be very focused on sort of actionable outcomes based on those activities.
Very clear. Thank you very much.
Adding to that, I think government also plays a role in setting sort of a signal that something is important sometimes. When I look at the US, back in 2018, there was a National Quantum Initiative Act. And it was something where the government really said, no, quantum is important. We all have to go after it. Here's some funding. The funding is incredibly important. But just even the sort of act of putting that out there and saying, we are standing behind this, we have put budget behind this, compete a little bit of healthy competition, right, to see who can get these. And I'm not just saying this because Illinois has four of the labs that came out of that, so we were pretty excited about it. But I think that was really the point where, from the scientific perspective, scientists started to see, oh, maybe we should really think about pursuing it. Maybe we should think about sort of how can we move this to the next stage. And I think that was a good start to that.
Thank you. Stefanos?
Yeah, going back to my point about irreverence, I'm gonna respectfully flip the question and ask instead, what are industrialists? What can industrialists do in order to promote, in fact, their own purposes? And here, I want to also flip the dictum, necessity is the mother of invention. Actually, many times invention is the mother of necessity. So my take is, take some risk. Just tinker for the sake of tinkering. And the government is there to help you do that, especially where I am. There's a variety of programs that favor industry and academia collaborations. And that's there for you. Also, the government is already funding programs like the one at Université de Sherbrooke, where we have undergrads who actually are taking courses in computer science, quantum physics, math, even finance, bio, at the same time. They have a very interdisciplinary background baked into their programs. And so, what I would say is, even for industrialists who, you think your problems are cut and dry and it's okay, it's a combinatorial optimization and that's what it is. Try and look at it from different angles because maybe you will unlock something. Maybe by initially complexifying your problem, you might make it more amenable to a different mode of computation, right? And then if you have an idea like this, go find an academic or government collaborator and try to build a project together. Now, this will not happen overnight. Interdisciplinary projects are tough. We talk about always promoting interdisciplinarity, but it takes persistence to actually build interdisciplinary collaborations and partnerships. And again, the government is there for that already. We, at least in Canada, I guess I have a bit of a biased take here because I'm from an ecosystem that I absolutely love. Allowed me to do research that I couldn't even imagine before. So yes, the government can do things. Yes, the government is already doing things. It is important to find a way to put it to good use from the industrial perspective.
Thank you very much. Yes,
can I add to that?
Of course, we have a few minutes.
Yes, I couldn't agree more on the industry role. I've spent my career entirely in industry. So how do you generate value from emerging technologies? A problem statement that I've spent my career on, and it absolutely takes a willingness to risk, to experiment, to rethink problems, and to think about how could you decompose problems you think you've understood, and decompose them and think about them differently. And all of a sudden, you start to get people around the table that are looking at new workflows and new ways of breaking down a complex problem. Financial services is my background. So in financial services, what does that workflow look like? And how do I combine AI and quantum? And maybe there's ways of tackling this problem that actually are really, really compelling we hadn't thought about, but that requires a willingness to sit down and start to think about those problems in different ways. And that is something that has to come from industry. They have to be at the table. We can help them to get to the table, that's part of our role, but we need them at the table.
Can I also add to that? Sorry, I know you're trying to get to the next question, but I think that's such a good point, and bringing it back to your original question, I think a little bit. I think we all talked about sort of like federal country level government. Moving that to state level a little bit from my perspective from the States. Illinois, where Chicago is and where I'm from, is famously our governor calls himself a quantum nerd, which is amazing. He's actually a VC, he's not a scientist, but it has been such a sort of important thing to have a champion like that, because what that means is it does speak to those industries, it does speak to sort of the non-scientists to come to the table, invites them to show up and say, be a part of this problem. This is signals that all sorts of things that I'm so grateful that our local government is doing, both from a funding perspective, putting quantum in the economic development plan, all of these things to signal that, but coming from a non-scientist, I think sometimes it invites that sort of other groups to the table to join the conversation, brings important perspectives, forces you to look at that problem a little bit differently than you would have otherwise.
Thank you. Well, we'll conclude on that note. Thank you to all three of you. Thank you very much. Please, a big round of applause for them.